Rain drizzled across the darkened streets of Atlanta, blurring the neon lights into smudges of red and gold. Inside his parked cruiser, Officer Hank Morrison watched the night like a predator in waiting. His fingers drummed against the steering wheel, impatient, restless. On the crackling police radio, an announcer's voice cut through the static. "Tomorrow marks the arrival of our new precinct captain, a leader known for tearing down walls of corruption." Hank snorted, reaching over to twist the volume knob down. New leadership meant scrutiny. It meant trouble. That's when he saw her. A black SUV, sleek and out of place on this side of town, glided past. Behind the wheel, a black woman in a sharp, tailored suit, her posture straight, her gaze forward. Something inside Hank coiled tight. Arrogance, defiance. She needed reminding who controlled these streets. He flicked on the siren lights. Tonight, he told himself, he'd put her in her place, but what Hank Morrison didn't know was he was about to destroy his own career with his own hands. Hank adjusted his mirror as he merged into traffic, his cruiser rolling slow and heavy like a shark in shallow waters. He didn't need a reason. His instinct told him all he needed to know: people like her didn't belong here. He tailed the black SUV for 3 blocks, eyes narrowing at every cautious turn she made, every perfectly timed signal, too clean, too polished. It made his skin crawl. Behind the wheel, Monica Grant remained composed. The tailored navy suit she wore clung sharply to her frame, the crispness of it daring anyone to challenge her right to be there. She was elegance without apology, and that was the kind of thing Hank Morrison hated most. "Out of your lane, lady," he muttered under his breath, his hand hovering over the siren switch. Beside him, in the passenger seat, sat Officer Emily Saunders, young, earnest, and just green enough to think she could still make a difference. Emily tapped notes into her tablet, barely glancing up until the sudden flash of red and blue lights bathed the street. She frowned. "What's the probable cause?" she asked carefully. Already knowing there wasn't one, Hank's lip curled into a half smirk. "Probable cause is for rookies who don't know what they're looking at." Emily's stomach twisted, but she stayed silent as Hank pulled the cruiser up tight behind Monica's SUV. The vehicle slowed immediately, blinker flashing, moving to the curb with practiced ease. There was no panic, no sudden movement, only precision, like someone who understood exactly how dangerous even one wrong move could be. Hank threw the car into park and stepped out, his boots slapping the wet asphalt. Rain misted his uniform as he approached the driver's side. Emily hesitated for half a second before following, her heart hammering louder than the raindrops against her vest. As she neared the SUV, she caught a glimpse of the driver through the tinted window. Calm, alert, unafraid. And suddenly, Emily knew whoever this woman was. She wasn't some random driver caught on the wrong side of town. This was someone who knew exactly where she was, and exactly how dangerous people like Hank Morrison could be. The window slid down with a muted hum, revealing Monica's face poised, expression unreadable. Hank leaned in, rain dripping from the brim of his hat onto the window frame. He loomed, using his size to fill her view, an old intimidation tactic he didn't even bother to hide. "License and registration," he barked. No greeting, no explanation. Monica moved slowly, her hands visible at all times. Her movements were deliberate, each one telegraphing the same unspoken message: "I am no threat. You don't get to make me one." She placed her license and registration on the dashboard and slid them toward him with 2 fingers. "Is there a problem, officer?" Her voice was low, calm, carefully measured. Hank didn't answer. He snatched the documents, giving them only a cursory glance. His eyes weren't on her paperwork. They were on her car, her clothes, the confident set of her shoulders. "You live around here, he demanded. Monica tilted her head slightly, a small movement that carried an ocean of quiet defiance. "I'm attending a meeting a few blocks over," she said. "Is there a reason you pulled me over, E?" Hank sneered, leaning a little closer. "Lots of break-ins around here lately. Gotta be careful who's prowling the streets." From behind him, Emily stiffened. She opened her mouth, then closed it. The lie sat heavy in the damp night air. There hadn't been a break-in reported in this area for weeks. Monica didn't flinch. "I see," she said simply, offering no apology, no nervous fidgeting. Hank was clearly hoping for. That only made him angrier. He straightened, pacing once around the SUV like a wolf circling prey. His flashlight beam danced over the car's spotless interior, searching for something, anything he could twist into probable cause. "Mind if I take a look inside?" he asked, voice oily smooth now. "You don't have probable cause?" "Oh, that's us," Monica replied evenly. "And unless I'm under arrest, I'm not consenting to a search." Emily's breath caught. The woman wasn't just confident she knew her rights inside and out. That made her dangerous, at least in Hank's eyes. For a beat, the rain filled the silence between them. A normal cop would have let it go. A professional would have walked away. Hank Morrison was neither. Without warning, he yanked the door handle. Monica's hand shot out, pressing firmly against the inside of the door to keep it shut. "Step out of the vehicle," Hank barked. His other hand hovered near his holster. Emily took a step forward instinctively. "Hank," she began, but he cut her off with a sharp look that froze her mid-word. Monica exhaled slowly. Unlocking the door herself, she stepped out with a grace that seemed to mock Hank's aggression, her heels clicking softly against the wet pavement. Standing there, drenched but unbowed, Monica Grant looked Hank Morrison straight in the eye and smiled. Not a warm smile, not a friendly one. A smile that said, "You think you're in control, but you're already losing." Hank circled Monica like a buzzard, close enough that his shoulder brushed hers as he inspected the SUV. Emily hovered nearby, pulse hammering in her throat, rain soaking through her uniform. There was no probable cause, no violation, no broken taillight or expired tag to hide behind, just Hank's raw, festering hatred and his determination to find something to justify it. "Pop the trunk," he ordered, voice sharp. Monica's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Without a warrant?" she asked, still calm. "Are you refusing a lawful order?" Hank snapped. Behind them, unnoticed by Hank, a teenage boy with a battered smartphone shifted closer on the sidewalk. He held the phone low, pretending to text, but the lens was pointed straight at the scene, recording, witnessing. Monica exhaled slowly, shoulders rising and falling once. Then, with the detached professionalism of someone used to battles like this, she pressed the trunk release. The SUV's rear hatch clicked open. Hank yanked it up and began rummaging, tossing aside a gym bag, a laptop case, a leather folder, all meticulously organized. Nothing. His jaw clenched. Rain slicked his gloves as he reached deeper, moving with growing frustration. Still nothing. And then, as Emily watched, heart sinking, Hank's hand slipped into his own jacket pocket, emerging with a small, clear bag, a bag filled with a suspicious white powder. Her stomach lurched. No, 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 no. Hank moved fast, sliding the bag under the driver's seat with a sleight of hand honed by years of unchecked authority. He straightened, turning toward the gathering crowd, now maybe a dozen people, phones raised, whispering among themselves. Well, "Thought tweets the show, oh," Hank said, holding up the planted evidence like a prize. His voice rang out over the sound of rain. "Looks like we got ourselves a little drug problem here." One beach ready. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Monica's face remained still, but her eyes sharpened, cutting through Hank like a blade. That's not mine. She said, not pleading, not panicking, just stating it. A fact, a challenge. Hank sneered, already pulling handcuffs from his belt. You people always say that. He muttered under his breath, loud enough for only Monica and Emily to hear. Emily felt her feet rooted to the ground. She had seen it, clear as day. There was no mistaking what Hank had done. The teenage boy on the sidewalk adjusted his grip on the phone, zooming in, capturing every sickening second. Monica turned her gaze not to Hank, but to Emily. Their eyes locked. A silent plea passed between them. Say something. Don't let this happen. Emily's heart pounded against her ribs. This was the line her father had warned her about when she first pinned on her badge. Integrity isn't easy, he'd said. It's just right. Hank moved closer, cuffs ready, authority dripping from every inch of his body, and Emily knew if she stayed silent now, she would never forgive herself. Emily's lungs burned, as if the rain itself had seeped inside her, weighing her down. She watched Hank click the cuffs open, stepping toward Monica with the casual cruelty of someone who had done this before and gotten away with it. Her mouth was dry. Her hands shook at her sides. She could almost hear the badge pinned over her heart, ticking like a bomb. Speak, say something. But fear gripped her like a vice. Fear of losing her job. Fear of retaliation. Fear that if she opened her mouth, she'd be the next one Hank targeted. She thought about the academy lectures, the endless slogans about honor, service, integrity, words that felt thinner than the misty air clinging to her skin. Across from her, Monica stood still, rain streaking her face like tears she refused to shed. She didn't beg, she didn't argue, she just waited, trusting someone would remember the oath they swore. Emily's throat closed around a sob she barely swallowed. If she stayed silent, she wasn't just letting Monica down, she was letting herself rot from the inside out. You don't stand by and watch wrong happen. Her father's voice echoed. You stand up, even if your knees are shaking. She took a step forward, small, barely noticeable, her voice caught in her chest. Hank noticed her movement out of the corner of his eye and barked without turning. Stay out of this. Rookie, you don't know what you're talking about. Aunt for water. The words hit her like a slap. Maybe once, months ago, she would have believed that, trusted the old guard to know best. Not tonight, not after seeing what she had seen. Emily felt something break loose inside her, something tight and rusted and ready to be torn away. Her voice came out hoarse but strong. No. Hank froze. The cuffs dangling from his hand rattled in the sudden silence. No. Or, Emily repeated, louder this time, stepping fully into the beam of the cruiser's headlights. I saw you. The crowd stirred, shifting forward as if pulled by gravity, phones raised higher. The teenage boy zoomed in. Hank turned, eyes burning with fury. You better think real hard about what you're saying. Saunders. After he hissed, you're throwing away your future. Emily shook her head, a small, almost sad smile on her lips. If covering for you is the price of my future, she said, voice steadying, then maybe it's not a future worth having. The words seemed to hang in the wet night air, shimmering with the weight of truth. Monica's lips curved, just barely, not in triumph, but in something closer to gratitude. and relief. For a long moment, no one moved. Rain pattered against the asphalt, a steady drumbeat marking the seconds that hung thick and heavy in the air. Hank stared at Emily, his face twisting between rage and disbelief. His world, the one where power always protected him, was cracking open. The crowd edged closer, phones up, recording everything. There was no undoing this, no brushing it under the rug, not this time. Hank's voice was a low snarl. "You're finished. Saunders, you think these people are going to save you?" Emily didn't flinch. "I don't need saving," she said quietly. "I just needed to remember who I am." Before Hank could spit back a retort, Monica spoke, and her voice cut sharper than any siren. "Officer Morrison." "Us," she said, her tone formal, commanding. "You might want to reconsider your next move very carefully." Hank rounded on her, lip curled. "And why's that? Lady, you think pulling the race card's gonna get you out of this?" Monica moved slowly, deliberately, reaching into the inside pocket of her rain-slicked blazer. Every cop instinct in Hank screamed at him to reach for his weapon, but something in her calmness rooted him to the spot. She pulled out a black leather badge holder, flipping it open with a flick of her wrist. The shield inside gleamed under the flashing cruiser lights, and the name below it burned through the mist. Captain Monica Grant, Atlanta Police Department. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone swore under their breath. Hank stumbled back a step, staring as if the badge might bite him. That's not possible," he stammered. Monica tucked the badge away, straightening to her full height. "You didn't even ask my name before you decided I was guilty," she said, her voice steady. "But let me be crystal clear, even if I were just another citizen, you still had no right to treat me this way." The color drained from Hank's face. For the first time that night, real fear flickered in his eyes. Emily stepped closer to Monica, feeling a surge of fierce loyalty she hadn't felt in years. This wasn't just a good woman standing her ground. This was leadership, the kind the city and the badge deserved. The teenage boy with the phone grinned wide, whispering, "Yo, the lady's the boss." The crowd erupted, a mixture of cheers, angry shouts, and chants for justice. Monica kept her gaze locked on Hank. "Hand over your weapon and badge." She ordered, voice brooking no argument. "You are suspended. Effective immediately. Pending an internal investigation." For a moment, Hank looked like he might refuse, might double down on the only power he knew, but the cameras were rolling, the witnesses were many, and there was no cover story big enough to crawl under now. With a trembling hand, he unclipped his badge and gun belt, holding them out like poisoned offerings. Monica accepted them without ceremony, tucking them under her arm. "You can save your excuses for internal affairs." "Oh," she said coldly, "assuming you still think they'll believe you." Hank opened his mouth, maybe to beg, maybe to threaten, but Monica turned away before he could speak. To the watching crowd, to the dozens of strangers who had stopped to bear witness, she raised her voice. "This isn't about one bad officer," she said. "It's about every system that allows people like him to think they're untouchable. That ends tonight." The crowd roared their approval, and for the first time since stepping out of her car, Monica allowed herself a real smile. Not a smile of victory, a smile of beginning. The backup cruisers screeched to a halt a block away, lights strobing against the rain-slicked pavement. Two uniformed officers jogged toward the scene, hands hovering near their belts, eyes flicking from the crowd to Monica to the grim-faced Hank Morrison. Monica stepped forward, badge still tucked firmly under her arm. "Officers!" she called out, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "Escort Mr. Morrison back to the precinct. He's suspended pending investigation for misconduct, abuse of power, and evidence tampering." The two officers hesitated for half a second, long enough to reveal they recognized Morrison. But then, seeing the phones, the cameras, the witnesses, they nodded. "Yes, ma'am, Hank's mouth twisted into something between a sneer and a snarl. "You think this little show's gonna change anything?" he spat. "You think calling me out fixes the streets?" Monica faced him squarely, her expression carved from stone. "No," she said. "Calling you out is just the beginning. Cleaning up the streets starts with cleaning up who we let patrol them." The officers took Hank by the arms, not roughly, but firmly, and led him away. The crowd parted, watching silently as the man who once lorded over these streets vanished into the flashing lights. Emily exhaled shakily beside Monica. "You didn't just stand up for yourself," she said, voice thick with emotion. "You stood up for all of us." Dean, Monica glanced sideways at her, a spark of warmth breaking through the steel in her gaze. "I stood up because someone had the guts to stand with me." "Sakwatorundichi," she said. The teenage boy who had recorded everything stepped forward, phone still in hand. "Mom," he said shyly, "we got your back. Whole neighborhood's gonna see this. Whole city." Monica smiled, a real one this time. "Good," she said. "Change doesn't happen in secret. It happens when everyone sees, and no one looks away." She turned to the larger crowd, raising her voice so all could hear, "This badge," she said, holding it high, "doesn't grant power. It demands accountability. It demands honor. Tonight, we showed what happens when we remember that." Cheers broke out, scattered at first, then swelling into a wave. Phones lit up like fireflies, recording, streaming, amplifying the moment far beyond this rain-soaked corner of Atlanta. Monica lowered her badge, feeling its true weight settle against her palm. This was only the first battle. There would be more, harder ones, but tonight proved something she had always believed even when the world tried to grind it out of her. Integrity could still win, and as the crowd surrounded her and Emily, chanting for justice, Monica Grant knew one unshakable truth. This time, they weren't alone. As the flashing lights receded into the night, Monica and Emily stood side by side on the rain-washed sidewalk, their reflections shimmering in puddles at their feet. The crowd began to drift away, but the energy lingered, a charged pulse in the heart of the city, a promise that this night would not be forgotten. A local news crew had arrived, the reporter shoving a microphone toward Monica. Breathless, "Captain Grant, can you tell us what happened here tonight?" Monica looked directly into the camera, her voice steady despite the weight of everything she carried. "What happened tonight is simple." "Samas," she said. "Someone tried to use fear to silence justice, but fear lost." She paused, letting the words sink in. "And it'll keep losing every time someone chooses integrity over comfort, every time someone speaks up instead of looking away." Behind her, Emily straightened, the dampness of the night forgotten in the light of something stronger pride. Monica offered a final glance toward the camera, her words soft but cutting through the night like a beacon. Change doesn't start with orders. It starts with courage. It starts with one person refusing to let wrong win. Tonight, it started here. The camera light blinked off. The reporter lowered the mic, and in that sudden hush, Emily realized for the first time since joining the force she didn't just wear the badge, she honored it. Monica placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "Come on, Officer Saunders," she said with a faint smile. "We've got a precinct to rebuild." Saying, together, they walked back toward the cruiser not as enforcers of the old way, but as architects of something new.